Yo, what's up, ladies and gentlemen? Good to see you again. And today I wanted to go over kind of the core build of some of the top placing purple Luffy decks. You guys know I'm a big purple Luffy fan. I've been really enjoying the deck as of late. But from the North American and Latin American finals, we had a couple of purple Luffy decks that did top. And I took every single one of those decks and broke down the 40 core cards that they all share, and then their 10 tech choices. So I want to go over some of these and kind of why they run certain cards, as well as, you know, why they don't run certain cards. But before I hop into that, and before we hit the actual point of today's video, I did have a very big announcement that I wanted to make. And if you haven't been in any of my live streams, you might not have heard me talk about this. So I would check out either my Twitch stream or my YouTube stream. I always have the links down below in the description. But I'm going to be running weekly webcam tournaments coming up very soon. Now, I do say weekly. It might start out bi-weekly because it is going to be a feeler process. I'm going to be testing this out, figuring out how I want to do it and how I can make it better. But the goal is to eventually get to weekly webcam locals that we are going to be hosting on my live streams, and I will be posting the recordings here on YouTube. But it's going to be starting on January 27th. This first event isn't going to be a sign-up event for everybody. I just want you guys to know that. It's going to be more of a test event, and it's going to be a lot of my local friends as well as good friends through Discord and the stream. I want to make this obviously more accessible to everybody, but the first one's just going to be 32 players. It's just to test it, you know, get out, you know, iron out the kinks and figure out what I could be doing better. But we're going to be hosting this on Monday. Monday's a really easy day for me because I don't have work on Mondays, but I know that might not be the best day for everybody. I'm going to try and get this to weekends eventually. We're just going to start out there and kind of see where it goes. We're going for prize cards of either, or excuse me, prizes of either boxes, prize cards, whether it's top 64 cards, top 16, cash, and case tournaments eventually. There might also be like some other small, like really cool prizes thrown in there, but well, for example, I actually am going to be having custom winner cards made by TheLuffyTCG to kind of support the players, and the top 4 players in particular are going to be getting prize cards. First place going to have a winner stamp, and then second through fourth will just be the non-winner stamp version of those cards. I'm shooting for 64 to 128 players throughout these tournaments, so they should be very big. There'll be great ways to get practice in and everything before really big events. I would join my Discord if you are interested in any of this and you want to be a part of some of the tournaments in the future. And if you are someone that's maybe interested in judging, I haven't made a portion for it in the Discord just yet, but in the near future, I'll be asking if we do have any certified judges in the Discord that would be interested. You will be compensated for your time. I'm not going to be asking anybody to, you know, just come and do this, you know, for free. You know, I want to make sure that everybody is, you know, being compensated, and we're going to be looking good. I also wanted to mention that we do have a bunch of sponsors that are interested in working with the tournament already, but I'm going to be doing this weekly, so the more the merrier. If you are interested or know someone that might be interested in sponsoring one of the tournaments, whether that's through providing prizes like boxes, or potentially a cash sponsorship for prizes for the players, and you know, it really could be anything. Feel free to reach out to me, whether that's through Discord DMs, X DMs, or through my business email, which is TheLuffyTV@gmail.com. Yeah, but other than that, I'm really excited about it. Just wanted to make a quick announcement about it here. And let's just go ahead and let's just hop straight into the video. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, I went through, I believe it was 6 decks that ended up topping either top 32 of North America finals or the top 64 of the Latin America finals. These were the lists I was able to find between Eggman events as well as One Piece top decks. And between all of the decks, there were cards that were ran in every single deck. That's to be expected, right? But the ratios are very interesting on some of them. Obviously, some decks had higher of certain of these cards that I'm going to go over. Others had lower, but actually, no, none of them had lower. Now that I think about it, yeah, excuse me. All of these decks had exactly this many copies of this card in their deck. So that's why I said this is the core 40 of the Purple Luffy decks that were built and did well in these tournaments. And then the other 10 were basically either tech choices or taking some of these cards and upping their value. And so I thought it was really interesting to go over this. And some of the ratios I found, very interesting because I personally like to see, how everyone else is building it comparatively to me. So we had the 4 of the 1 cost law. This is a very obvious staple in the deck, just being able to search out your Straw Hat or Heart Pirates type cards. The tough part is that the deck doesn't really have many great Heart Pirates options just yet. I think eventually we'll be able to see some Heart Pirates, type synergy coming on into the deck, but at the moment, just not there. So it's mostly just a Straw Hat Searcher, but your 1 cost, 2k power, 1k counter law. This was ran as a 4 of, and I personally, it's a no-brainer for me why this was ran. And then we had Nico Robin. So this is really interesting. Out of all 6 decks, 1 Nico Robin was played. Minimum, right? Some decks ran 2, but that was the highest that I saw. 1 Nico Robin, though, in every single copy of the deck. I believe it was 2 out of the 6 that ran 1 copy and 4 out of the 6 that ran 2, if I'm not mistaken. But Nico Robin's just a really great, cheap blocker in this meta right now, because there's so many decks that just have these really large swings, and for you to get out of them can be very costly, or just having to use a giant to, protect yourself. This is just that 2 Dawn from the previous turn, super cheap, get it out of my way blocker. So I'm a huge fan of this card. I've been trying the deck without it. I've been trying it with it. I personally do like the idea of at least running 1 in the deck. It's not something that you have to see. It's just that when I do see it, there might be a position for me to use it, and it's never a brick in your hand, which is probably the best part about it. A 1k counter is always solid. A 4 Usohachi, I think this is just very obvious without saying. This is the best 2k counter in the deck. Being able to rest your opponent's blockers once you get to that 8 Dawn or higher, tier, is so powerful. This card is incredible. It's a threat your opponent has to recognize. It's also, I play this card, sometimes into the Blackbeard matchup just because it's a swing. It's a swing that your opponent is not really going to respect that often, but they kind of have to, because it's only 2 Dawn to get a 5k swing through. It's just that extra damage that can really get there. But 4 of Usohachi, very obvious. This next one's also very obvious. 4 of Zorojuro. It's just extremely important for the purpose of the deck, being able to search out your cards, play out a very strong body. The combination with Luffy Taro is invaluable. So, this is kind of a no-brainer. 4, obviously. 4 Sangoro as well. This is your real engine between the Zorojuro, Sangoro, and Luffy Taro. All of those are very obvious 4s. But we get closer to some of the more interesting ratios here very shortly. And that is Eustace Kid. Now, I personally think that it's a no-brainer that this should be 4. But I have had very many conflicting, theories in both my chat, but also my comments here on YouTube, where people believe this card should be a 3 of, you can subtract this and add something else. I think that it really lessens your ability to do well going second. This deck constantly wants to go first, but being able to steal second and then, have a very strong play off of that is incredible. So personally, I'm of the mindset that this card can't be ran less than 4, and it obviously shows that all of the top placing decks for Purple Luffy ran this card at 4, and they did extremely well. Sanji at 4. This card is just a great 2K. It is a really nice combo blocker depending on what you're able to get your Dawn to in specific situations. So I do think that the Sanji is a very powerful choice, and it works extremely well with the next card, which is Sanji. Now this is one of the most interesting ratios that I saw. After testing with this card a lot, I absolutely love this card, but I thought that for sure it was a 2 of and no more in the deck. And apparently I could not have been more wrong. Every single list ran 3 to 4 Sanji that topped with these Purple Luffy decks. So I obviously could have been very wrong because this card was putting in work for these guys over the past 2 weekends. Sanji is just so perfect for if you miss your Luffy Taro, you still want to be aggressive. You want to try and take back board control, rest pesky blockers when you're going for game at the end of the game. This is like, I don't know why I thought it was a 2 of to start. I just thought that there was a lot of circumstances where I didn't really feel the absolute necessity to use it. But the more that I've played with it, I can understand why this is a minimum 3 of. And there were, I believe, 2 of the 6 decks that ran 4 Sanji, and then the other 4 ran 3. So very interesting. I thought this was a really unique ratio for me personally. I wanted to kind of see where people's mindsets were on this card, and this has definitely been a pretty cool answer for me. For Luffy Taro, I think this is just, without saying, this is very obvious. This is like the bread and butter of the deck. You have to have this, Zorojuro and Sangoro at 4 in order for it to perform the way that you need it to. And now getting to Lin. So the minimum that everyone was running was 2. That was the minimum. I believe there were 3 out of the 6 decks that ran 2. No, excuse me. 2 out of the 6 decks that ran 2 Linlins. There were 3 out of the 6 decks that ran 3 Linlins, and there was 1 out of the 6 decks that ran 4 Linlins, like a psychopath. And I say like a psychopath because I was the guy that ran 4 Linlins at a previous Treasure Cup and got top 32, and everybody was calling me crazy. I personally think this card is extremely good, and I am of the mindset that 3 is perfect, 4 is maybe pushing it, but I really love that card because without seeing it into the Doflamingo matchup, it is miserable. Absolutely miserable. It's also a very powerful asset into the Black Yellow Luffy matchup, into the Bonnie matchup. There's many moments where I want to see this card, and I personally think that running it as at a 3 of is correct, but obviously some guys did really well with just running it at 2. Now onto Secret Rare Purple Luffy. I believe it was 5 out of the 6 decks that only ran 2 of this card, but 1 out of the 6 ran 3. And I thought that was interesting. He ran a 3-3 split of Linlin and Luffy, and did extremely well. He got top 8 in the North American Nationals. So I personally thought 3 was a little crazy, but based off of how his list was put together, with Bond Clays and really trying to ramp and get there soon, it made sense that he was really going for more of a, hey, if I don't get first and I have to take second, I have a really explosive start with seeing some of these cards. Now, that does make things very interesting in being able to play out a 9 cost on your turn 3 when going second if you do have that Bond Clay ramp. But it is scary to me, but I like the idea a lot. So This card is really great. I'm personally still a fan of running it at 2, but I completely understand that, you know, that guy was cooking something and we just hadn't had a taste of it yet. Now Gum Gum Giant is very obvious 4. You know, there wasn't a single deck that ran less than that. This card is so good. It's so unbelievably good. Extremely powerful and perfect for purple as a whole. So running 4 of this is an absolute must. And going into the tech choices that everyone had, I just obviously just put 1 copy of each of these cards. Besides these cards, there were no other tech choices, right? I didn't include Hitokiri because not every deck ran Hitokiri, surprisingly enough. I also didn't include Bon Clay because not every deck ran Bon Clay. So I just wanted to put the core 40 cards in the previous page, and to back out again just to show 4 Law, 1 Nico, 4 Usohachi, 4 Zorojuro, 4 Sangoro, 4 Kid, 4 Sanji, 3 7-cost Sanji, 4 Luffy Taro, 2 Linlin, 2 Luffy, and 4 Giant, you know, being the final ratios of what was included in every single deck. As far as the tech choices, though, I believe there was only 1 deck, if I'm not mistaken. Might have been 2, but I think it was only 1 deck that didn't run Bon Clay. So I personally think that after looking at it, the majority of top placing decks were running Bon Clay. They believe that after looking at it, the vast majority of decks did only run 2. There were a few though that ran, no, there was 1 that ran 3. And then there was, I believe, 1 or 2 that didn't run Bon Clay at all, and instead opted out for the Usopp, which I think is perfectly viable. I totally understand why you want to go Usopp. I do think it's a bit more of a gamble as far as, like, we're kind of hoping that we see first on our dice roll, because if we don't see first, it gets a little tricky. So I like the idea. I've been testing with this card in no Bon Clay as well. I think it's fine, but it does make your going second curve a little less good, if you will. But yeah, so Bon Clay, vast majority of decks were running this at 2. I think it's just powerful in being able to give you options for going second that you might not have had. Like, say you miss your Luffy Taro, being able to play this on your 7 Dawn turn would ramp you to 8, and then you can comfortably play a 4 cost without having to use your leader effect to ramp a life. You also could ramp and then play a 4 cost and a 5 cost. So it still gives you kind of that I played 2 cards in 1 turn aspect that, you know, Luffy Taro is known for, and without having it, I mean, this just gives you kind of that second option, which is really nice. Hitokiri Kamizo was ran in 5 of the 6 decks. There was 1 deck that did not run this card at all, and instead opted out for the Franosuke 2K counter, just ran 4 of those. I think that's fine, but I also this card has grown on me, personally. I wanted to see how this card would do, you know, as a, like, 2 of at the first time I was trying out this deck. Like, run this as 2, run Hitokiri, or Franosuke as 2 as well. But I ended up realizing that Franosuke was really only being played or useful in the Blackbeard matchup, and Hitokiri was just a really good option for me to play on turn 2 when going first if I didn't have a Zorojuro or a Bon Clay or something like that, right? So I like this kind of as a different option, personally. And yeah, I'm running 4 right now. The vast majority of decks were running 3 to 4, but there was one deck that was running 1 and another that was running 0. Now, Frankie, this is a really interesting tech choice. There was only 1 deck that had a 1 of Frankie. I personally don't like this card for this deck, but I understand why they have it in here. Because initially I thought it would be a great card too, But then the more that I tested with it, I was like, oh, this is like super reliant on having Kid on board. Otherwise, you're just going super negative. Frankie being a Dawn -2, trash 1, draw 2 cards is essentially an Onami that wasn't that's putting you more negative for a potential swing the next turn. That's why I like Onami a little bit better. Just being able to have that extra option of like, I don't need a swing, but I don't have to go Dawn negative to cycle out some of my cards and draw into some new things. Frankie was really interesting choice on there. Kind of surprised me, but it is what it is. Oh, speaking of Onami, I don't believe I put Onami on here, which it should be. Whoops, that's my fault. Okay, yes, Onami was a card that is not on this. Yes, because not every deck ran Onami. Yeah, there were a couple of decks that were running the Queen as well as the Frankie that I was just talking about, but not every deck ran Onami, so I didn't include it on there. The vast majority of decks ran Onami, though. Most decks had this as a 3 of. I believe there were 4 decks that had it as a 3 of. No, excuse me. 3 decks that had it as a 3 of. 2 decks that had it as a 2 of. And then 1 that just didn't include it altogether. But yeah, I believe that Onami is really... I at first was like, maybe this isn't the choice. And I took it out of the deck. And then the more that I played, the realization came to me that there's these later stages where I want to play Luffy Taro, but I can't play Luffy Taro and a Zorojuro or a Sangaro or something like that because I need some sort of defense, right? And Onami allows me to do that, but also get some new cards into hand and cycle out dead cards. So it gives me that blocker. It gives me new options in hand. It allows me to develop a Luffy Taro as well. And if I need to double blocker in one turn, I can play this and a 5-cost blocker, and I still have 1 Dawn up for Giant. So I personally have been really loving having Onami in the deck. I've been running 3 personally, but yeah, that was another interesting thing, was that not every deck ran Onami. Usopp, there were actually 2 lists that ran Usopp, one that ran Bon Clay and Usopp, one that ran no Bon Clay and strictly Usopp. So I think this is really just a Bon Clay substitute, but it's also just a really powerful card into some matchups that really aren't that favorable for you. So I think this card is extremely good into Lucci, just being able to give you an option of swinging 6 every single time, hurting their hand size, but also attacking their board, because a lot of the cards that they end up playing that are going to be swinging at you in the early stages of the game tend to be 6Ks or 4 for Brook, right? So not having to dedicate a Dawn to get 2K over the Brook and essentially guarantee the KO on it is very powerful, very favorable. So love to see that. We also have Fernosuke. Fernosuke is basically just the 2K counter of the deck that's searchable, but it has its uses. There's the most random usefulness for this card occasionally. I'm a big fan of this card in the Teach matchup, obviously, but I have been in weird spots where I could math win if I had the correct amount of swings, but I don't. But with Fernosuke in hand, I did. So it has its weird niche usages. I personally run it as like a 1 of in the deck. I don't go anything crazier than that. I like it a lot. I think this card's really powerful and it's very fun. But it's not, it just doesn't, it doesn't substitute your better options. I think the Hitokiri right now is just a great option for having an extra turn 2, 4 Dawn play. Whereas this is more kind of like endgame, really weird scenarios. So pretty niche, but I like it. It wasn't in every deck. It wasn't included in every deck because there were decks that were only running 12 2Ks. There were some that were running 13, and that's where Frenosuke was kind of put in. And there were other decks that were just running 12 as well, but they didn't run Hitokiri. They ran only Frenosuke. So, and the last tech choice that was in the decks as well was Queen. Queen was thrown in there into 2 decks out of the 6. I tried testing with Queen, and I love the card, but I have a tough time finding the space for it. That's the hardest part for me. I actually think that this is a really amazing endgame card because it gives you a potential attacker for the following turn. It allows you to cycle your hand, so it's arguably kind of like a better Onami in a way, if you need to defend up and also just give yourself like a really powerful attack for the next turn. I like this card a lot, but at the same time, I felt like I was bottom decking it too many times because I was only running like a 1 of, maybe 2 of. So it's hard to find space for a 2 of card when the deck is very tight. But now that we know the core 40 cards from these topping lists and we have these tech choices, I mean, I just wanted to give as much information as possible on Purple Luffy and why you can build it in so many different ways. The flexibility of it is extremely fun. But I thought this was a really cool kind of statistical analysis to go over of, you know, why certain ratios of cards were ran, why other cards weren't. You know, it really does boil down to what your matchups are as to how successful your particular build will go. But, you know, I still think that having a general idea of where to start and then how to finish is very important. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this. And other than that, I will catch y'all in the next one, guys. Peace.